When you think about American history, one question might come to mind. Which war was the deadliest? Which conflict took the most American lives? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Many people immediately picture the massive battles of World War II, with millions of soldiers storming beaches in Europe, fighting through the Pacific Islands, and confronting the Axis powers on a global scale. Others might point to World War I, with its trenches, poison gas, and staggering losses. Still others might think about Vietnam, a war that left deep scars on the nation, or even more recent conflicts like Iraq and Afghanistan. The thing is, most people actually get this wrong. And that's why today we're going to dive into this fascinating question. What was the deadliest war in American history? And why is the real answer so surprising? Before we get to the actual number, let's walk through America's wars one by one. Let's start with the Revolutionary War. This was the nation's beginning. The War of Independence fought between 1775 and 1783. The Revolutionary War gave us George Washington, the Declaration of Independence, and the story of a scrappy collection of colonies defeating the most powerful empire in the world at the time. But when it comes to American deaths, the number is lower than many would expect. Around 25,000 Americans died in the Revolution from both combat and disease. It was a staggering loss for a young nation, but compared to later wars, it seems small. Next, we move forward to the War of 1812, sometimes called the Second War of Independence. This was when the United States fought Britain again, between 1812 and 1815. It gave us the Star-Spangled Banner, Andrew Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans, and a renewed sense of national identity. But casualties? Around 15,000 Americans died. Significant, yes, but nowhere near the deadliest. Then came the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. This conflict often gets overlooked, but it changed the map of North America dramatically. The U.S. gained huge swaths of land, including what is now California, Texas, Arizona, and more. About 13,000 Americans died in the war, mostly from disease rather than combat. Again, tragic, but not the deadliest. Now, here's where the numbers start to rise. The Spanish-American War of 1898, famous for Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, and the explosion of the USS Maine, saw about 2,400 American deaths. Not very high compared to the global wars that would follow, but let's pause and think about the 20th century. If you ask most people, they'll quickly point to World War II. Why? Because it was the largest, most global, and most dramatic war in American memory. It spanned Europe, Africa, and Asia. It involved tens of millions of people worldwide. And American soldiers fought and died in massive campaigns. D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. The images of the war, storming Normandy beaches, raising the flag on Mount Suribachi, are burned into our cultural memory. In total, around 405,000 Americans died in World War II. That's an enormous number. For many people, that seals the deal. Surely this has to be the deadliest war in U.S. history. But hold on. Let's look at some of the other big wars. World War I, the Great War, fought from 1917 to 1918 for the U.S., cost about 116,000 American lives. A massive number, especially given the short time America was directly involved. The brutality of trench warfare, machine guns, and gas made it one of the most horrifying conflicts of the modern age. Vietnam? The war stretched across the 1960s and 1970s and profoundly changed American society. Nearly 58,000 Americans died there. The Korean War, sometimes called the Forgotten War, from 1950 to 1953, claimed about 36,000 American lives. Iraq and Afghanistan combined in the 21st century took around 7,000 American lives, which is significant but far lower than the great wars of the past century. So, at this point, if you're keeping track, you might be thinking the answer must be World War II. After all, 405,000 American deaths is a staggering figure. But remember the title of this video. The deadliest war in American history isn't the one you think, which means we still haven't reached the top. To find the real answer, we have to go back in time, to the middle of the 19th century, to a war fought not overseas, but here at home. A war where brother fought brother, neighbor fought neighbor, and the country nearly tore itself apart. I'm talking, of course, about the American Civil War. From 1861 to 1865, the Union and the Confederacy fought the bloodiest conflict in American history. And here's the shocking part. Around 620,000 to 750,000 Americans died in the Civil War. That number is almost twice the total of World War II. Imagine that. More Americans died fighting each other in the Civil War than in both world wars combined. Why so many? The answer lies in the scale of the conflict and the nature of the time. The Civil War was fought with deadly modern weapons, rifled muskets, cannons, ironclad ships, but with outdated tactics. Armies still marched in close formations, and battles turned into bloodbaths. Diseases like dysentery, typhoid, and pneumonia claimed more lives than bullets. Medical care was primitive. On top of that, every casualty counted as American. The battles themselves were unimaginably brutal. Antietam in 1862 saw about 23,000 casualties in a single day, the bloodiest day in American military history. Gettysburg in 1863 left about 50,000 casualties over 3 days. Shiloh, Chickamauga, Cold Harbor, the list goes on. Each battle left fields littered with the dead and wounded. Families across the country were torn apart, literally facing each other on opposite sides of the war. The Civil War also carried a unique emotional toll. This wasn't just a war of nations. It was a war of neighbors. Almost everyone in America at the time knew someone who had died in the war. And here's another factor. The population of the United States in the 1860s was much smaller than in the 1940s. In 1860, the U.S. had about 31 million people. By World War II, it had about 132 million. That means the Civil War's death toll was proportionally devastating, far greater than World War II when measured against population. If the Civil War happened with today's population size, the equivalent death toll would be over 6 million Americans. So, the deadliest war in U.S. history was not World War II, as many assume, but the Civil War, where Americans fought each other, and hundreds of thousands died. Now, why do so many people get this wrong? It comes down to memory and culture. World War II is often called the Good War. It was fought against clear villains, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, and the U.S. emerged as a global superpower afterward. Movies, books, and documentaries keep World War II vivid in our collective imagination. Meanwhile, the Civil War is remembered differently, through regional memory, complex debates about its causes, and painful reminders of slavery and division. But in terms of raw numbers, there is no comparison. The Civil War stands alone as America's deadliest conflict. So what lessons can we take from this? First, that war at home is uniquely devastating. When a nation turns against itself, the losses multiply in ways foreign wars rarely match. Second, that memory shapes perception. Just because we see one war more often in movies or TV doesn't mean it was deadlier. And third, that the Civil War's toll reminds us why unity matters, why reconciliation was so difficult, and why the scars of that war linger even today. Think about it. Every grave in every Civil War cemetery, every statue, every memorial is a reminder of a war that killed more Americans than any other. That's not just a statistic. It's a human story of lives cut short, families destroyed, and a country forced to rebuild from the ashes. So, the next time someone asks which war was the deadliest in U.S. history, you'll know the answer, and you'll know why it's not the one most people think. And before we close, let me ask you, were you surprised by this answer? Did you think it would be World War II before you watched this video? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to see how many people guessed correctly. If you enjoyed this deep dive into American history, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more history explained in plain English, and share this with a friend who loves learning. Because history is full of surprises, and sometimes the truths we uncover are the most shocking of all.